Hello everybody, this one's entitled John Lydon, U.K.I.P, It's All Rotten. And indeed it is. First of all, U.K.I.P. No need to say how loathsome I find these swivel-eyed creeps. Just check out my previous vidcasts on the subject. However, as predicted by my good self, they have somewhat risen in the firmament, a bit like a skyrocket at a firework one. Whether they'll end up in the gutter again quite soon is another matter, but they seem to be rising and rising. Now, I did say they might have 2 MPs, but they nearly come close to having 2 MPs, but they will have 2 MPs after the Rochester and Stroud by-election. Of that, I am fairly convinced. And that by-election will be a dirty one, to be sure. So we're probably less than 10 seats after the general election, even though they might get almost 20% of the vote. It could be that U.K.I.P and, quite ironically, the SNP may hold the balance of power. Now, I do intend to give full coverage to the election, prior to the election, after the election. I think it'll be an interesting time, and it's not going to be like the rest of the boring elections. I think it will be bitterly contested, and it'll be like being in Weimar, Germany in 1931 or something. It's not that U.K.I.P will hold the balance of power in the future. They may do. It's right now that Nigel Farage and his crew, along with a variety of other factors, I must admit, are pushing all streams of mainstream politics further to the right, almost on a daily basis, I think. Over the last couple of weeks, we've already had, for example, with Labour, Ed Balls gleefully announcing, as though it was some sort of a triumph, some sort of genius stroke, he's going to reduce child benefit. And in the Observer last Sunday, according to the slimy Ed Miliband, is saying that there will be tougher rules on benefits for new migrants. And to earn the right to state benefits, they'd have to have stiff English language courses, and they'd have to pass them. As I say, that was in last Sunday's Observer front page. Fucking hell. Half the indigenous population here can't speak proper English anyway, myself included. So it's a really smart guy there, isn't he? Meanwhile, on the other side, there's been a kind of a Freudian slip from Lord Freud, unelected Conservative welfare reform minister, who, in an unguarded moment, said that disabled working people should be paid less than the already pitiful minimum wage. £2 an hour was mentioned. No, don't go spending all that at once. So that's what they really think of us. I have a sufficient flow of 4-letter words and cursing to describe Freud and his whole revolting, ubiquitous plan. Lord Freud is, incidentally, you may have guessed it, a former Labour Party advisor. The main parties are leapfrogging over each other to out U.K.I.P. U.K.I.P. U.K.I.P itself certainly represents a tsunami-like protest vote to the right. And where really else can you expect such a situation in this right-wing country of ours as it is at the moment? There is so far no real challenge to the system apart from the illusion of U.K.I.P. And the U.K.I.P vote is all due to insecurity. And who can blame people for feeling threatened, insecure, marginalised in the present warped climate where the majority are experiencing falling living standards, quality of life, and a genuine fear for the future? And look at, for example, as always, how immigration is now the perennial hot topic. All the debate, if it can be called that, pro or anti-immigration, is on the right. East Europeans are the latest bugbears, or will become the latest bugbears. They are, in what most UK strongholds, are seen as taking our jobs, homes, shops. Most of this is completely and absolutely irrational. But the lower reaches of society, there is an intense competition for housing, work, school places, education, and access to the disintegrated National Health Service. These are the people that are coming out and voting U.K.I.P en masse, not the middle classes. But people are being diverted, mostly willingly, it must be admitted, from other factors such as the obscene shift in wealth to the rich and super rich, the huge influx of the international rich, in London in particular, this has totally distorted an already grossly impossible housing situation. People at the lower end of the so-called housing market aren't struggling to buy rent homes or flats. It's single rooms, sheds at over £100 a week of people's back gardens, or even space on a bit of cardboard beneath the underpasses. Go to Park Lane, where the rich have been complaining about this eyesore, for an example of this. You need an income of over £2,000 a week to afford to get onto the housing letter here in London, and that's the meanest of dwellings. If you aren't already on that vaunted housing ladder, commercial rent is becoming impossible and beyond most people's pockets. Labour, Tory, U.K.I.P have no answer to these problems apart from divide and rule, which we all lap up, of course, and meaningless slogans about East Europeans, which again we all lap up. Population is, as a whole, and always has been, less than 5% of this population are actually involved in any sort of politics or social action, and it's a shrinking proportion at that. And you don't have to be overpaid pundits to guess what socio-economic grouping these people come from. It's mostly, again, the middle class. The feeling is, in general, that the elite political class are out for themselves. Surprise, surprise. Government of the rich and for the rich. Even so, such as the undeserved strength of the system, that justified anger and alienation of people of ill is directed in a right-wing direction. Hence, as I say, the rise of the populist right-wing U.K.I.P. Okay. But what about things like tomorrow's mass TUC demonstration? Frankly, my dears, it's as meaningless as voting for the main parties. It's the same tired old scenario, shuffling along in the drizzle from point A to point B to listen, if you can be bothered, after a 6-hour coach journey, to a load of union windbags and bureaucrats and Labour Party politicians who, as they're up on the platform, are daydreaming already about their comfy seats that they're going to get into the House of Lords. As the happy zombies sit there or stand there, applauding them mindlessly, and woe betide any disruptive elements, the rank and file will call them Tories or provocateurs, and the stewards will set the police on them. The days of the Black Bloc are over for the time being. If these marches or gatherings were insurgent, it would be an entirely different story, and I'd be out there myself, even if I had to go on crutches. But they ain't. And at this juncture, it doesn't seem that they're going to be for a long, long time. By every stretch of the imagination, these manifestations are essentially conservative, pro-system, calling for a Labour vote. Chuck out the Tories. Meanwhile, the media has been feeding us another false alternative, the much-hyped court jester Russell Brand, who's been doing the rounds, mega publicity in various medias, even turning up at the E15 squad. All this seems to be coincided with the imminent release of his new book, Revolution. Now, I've already done a couple of vidcasts on Mr. Brand, but once I've got around to reading a copy of Revolution, and I'll give you a firm but fair, and it will be fair, comment on it in a future vidcast, so it can help you decide if you want to buy it at Christmas for a special friend, or if you say something wrong, I don't want it for a Christmas present. Something else that's really irked me over the last couple of days is the recent filmed interview by Polly Toynbee of John Lydon of the former Sex Pistols and Anarchy in the UK fame. This aging idol, who used to go to my school incidentally, has also by a coincidence got a new book out, probably ghost written, and has embarked on a spat with Russell Brand, although he doesn't seem to be retaliating, which shows that he's got some sense. In a truly excruciating interview with Polly Toynbee, who was gushing all over Mr. Lydon as he regaled her with his barely articulate splutterings and pearls of wisdom, from the look on their faces, which was that of intense rapture, you think they're undergoing a rerun under the table of The Last Tango in Paris, using the butter that Mr. Lydon advertises on television. During this weird and extremely strange love fest, Lydon bitterly criticises Russell Brand for advocating revolution, oh how could he, and calling on people not to vote. The former iconoclast, Mr. Lydon, looking and sounding like a retarded cockatoo, right down to his yellow sprouting barnet, seems to think that voting is all you can do to change the system, adding, for good measure, that he always thought that anarchy was just a mind game for the middle classes. He may have sung about it, but he obviously knows fuck all about it. Anarchy, Mr. Lydon, amongst other things, is about revolution, class struggle, empowerment. It's a historical movement going back over 100 years, about 150 years, fought for on the streets, in the workplaces, neighbourhoods, or wherever we find ourselves. I certainly won't be reading his pretentiously titled Anger is an Energy. Frankly, none of these people are an alternative, which lays with you, me, our workmates, neighbours, friends and relations, and our class. That's where the alternative lays. And it lays out on the streets. It's not U.K.I.P, not Labour, and certainly not Mr. Lydon, who I hope drowns in his Los Angeles swimming pool.